All right, I'm combining 9.1 and 9.2 here. If you haven't seen the announcement yet, I've made 9.3 and 9.4 bonus, so you don't have to do those if you don't want to, but you can earn some extra points if you want to deal with those. Let's look on 9.1, the short section. Okay, and really, if you can do percentages, then you're okay on 9.1. Let's look at a couple of those anyway. It says use the information provided in the table, determine how much monthly income would be necessary to budget for loan fees over the 9-month academic year. Round your answer to the nearest cent if necessary. And let me adjust my pen here. Okay, so we want to look at loan fees. So it says that's $172. Okay, that's over 9 months. So all we have to do here is we take 172, divide that by 9. Let's see what we get. So 172 divided by 9. And that's going to get us what rounds to $19.11 per month. And that's how much we need to budget out per month. And so that over the 9-month period, we end up with our $172. So just dividing there. Okay, let's look at another type of problem from 9.2. It says Layla has a job where she has a take-home salary each month of $2,900. If Layla wants to spend no more than 25% of her monthly take-home salary on rent, how much can she afford? So 25%, that's 0.025. Then we multiply that by her take-home pay of $2,900. We can figure out what her max rent budget is, so 0.25 times 2,900 give us a maximum budgeted rent $725. So that's how most of the problems in 9.1 are. They're not too tough, as long as you can do the percentages like we've done before. And now I've got several problems from 9.2. They're not really hard, but you just got to make sure you're using the right formula with each one. Okay. Let's look at this one. This one says, determine the simple interest earned on $10,000 after 10 years if the APR is 6%. So simple interest, and our formula, PRT, principal times the interest rate times the time. Okay, so if we want to figure out our interest on this one, our starting amount, our principal is $10,000. Okay. Times the interest rate, we've got to change this to a decimal, so it's 6%, so 0.06. And then time is always in years, so we're investing for 10 years here. Okay, so this will give us our simple interest, so 10,000 times 0.06 times 10 gives us a simple interest of $6,000. Okay, be careful on these. If this one just said just determine the interest, if it said what's the total we would get, what would we have to do? We would have to add the starting amount, right? So we'd have to add 10,000 and we would end up with 16,000. But this one just said just the interest. Okay? Right. Let's look at the next one. It says, suppose you wish to borrow $700 for 4 weeks and the amount of interest you must pay is $20 per $100 borrowed. What is the APR at which you are borrowing money? Okay, so on this one, since it's asking us what the APR is, and there's another similar problem, but it just asks you how much you have to pay back. This one's asking for the APR, the annual percentage rate. So on this one, we don't even care how much we're borrowing. Okay, what we do care about is that we're borrowing it for 4 weeks, and we got to pay $20 per $100 borrowed. That's what we need to figure out the APR. And I'll be honest with you, if you go to the tutor on Hawks on this one, to me it's really confusing. Okay, so here's what I think about on this one. So we need to figure out what our interest rate is, what our short-term interest rate is, right? So we have to pay $20 for every $100 that we borrow. So what is that, 20 out of 100? That's 20% interest. but that's over 4 weeks. And APR is annual, so that's over a year. And so we got to do a conversion here. This is our short term. Okay. So 4 weeks. So to me, the easiest thing to do is figure out the interest for 1 week and then multiply it by 52 because there's 52 weeks in a year. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 20% divided by 4 weeks. It's going to give me 5% per week. Okay. And then there's 52 weeks in a year. So I do 5% times 52. See what we get there. 5 times 52 gives me 260% interest. And so that is the APR, 260%. That's a really terrible interest rate when you think about it that way. Okay. All right, let's look at the next one. So it says a couple deposits $20,000 into an account earning 6% annual interest for 15 years. Calculate the future value of the investment if the interest is compounded quarterly. So this is important, how often the interest is compounded. We're dealing with compound interest on this one. Okay. And then it says calculate the future value. Okay. So our future value formula is A, our future value, which I know is weird there. You can call it FE if you want to. It's P times 1 plus R over N to the NT. Okay. R is the interest rate again. We got to change it to a decimal. T is the number of years again. And then N, this is how often our interest is compounded, how many times a year. So quarterly means 4 times a year. So here N is going to be 4. So to figure out our future value, we take our principal, our starting amount, which is $20,000, times 1 plus our interest rate, which is 6%, so we change that to a decimal, 0.06, divided by 4 because it's compounded quarterly, and then we'll raise that to the 4 times how many years? 15 years. So you have to be a little careful about where you put parentheses and things in your calculator on this one, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a parenthesis 1 plus 0.06 divided by 4, close parenthesis, and then I'm going to raise it to the exponent of, you can do 4 times 15, I know 4 times 15 is 60, so I'm going to raise it to the 60th power. So I haven't done the 20,000 part yet, but I get 2.44321. You can just leave it in your calculator, okay? You don't have to write it down, but then now I've got the 2.4321 long number in my calculator times 20,000. And then we can round to the nearest cent at the end. So I've got $48,864. And it rounds to 40 cents. I've got 0.395, so 40 cents. There's our number to the nearest cent. Calculator part's probably the hardest part on that. That, making sure you know your different N. Quarterly is 4. All right, next. This one's got a different formula, so I wanted to do it. This gives the list of the APR for some different loans. It says determine the APY, or effective interest rate. APY is annual percentage yield for a loan amount that is $100,000 or more. Okay, so the one we want $100,000 or more. So that's going to be our row of the table we care about. And then we also care about how often interest is compounded. If you look down here, it says interest is compounded daily. So how many days are there in here? There are, most years, there are 365. That's what we use for daily. Okay. So our formula for APY, and I'll give you all the formulas you need on the test, and there's a little link you can click on in Hawks that'll bring up the list of formulas. I don't expect you to know these. So for APY, it's 1 plus R over N to the N power minus 1, and then whatever that number is times 100%. Give this our APY. So here, we've got 1 plus our interest rate, which is 5.75%. So as a decimal, that's 0.0575, 0575, divided by N is compounded daily, so that's 365 to the 365th power minus 1, and then whatever number we get there, we're going to multiply times 100, and our answer will be a percentage. So let's see what we get. So I'm going to do parenthesis 1 plus 0.0575 divided by 365, close parentheses, and I'm going to raise it to the 365 power, hit equal, then I'm going to do minus 1. Okay, so I'm going to give you the number I got there. So I get 0.05918, and it goes on and on and on. You can just leave it in your calculator. You don't have to write it down. Now I got to do times 100%. I'm going to do times 100. And it says we can round to the nearest hundredth. That's 2 decimal places. So I'm going to get 5 point, and then I have 918, so that rounds to 92. So our APY, or our effective interest rate, is 5.92%. So even though our APR is 5.75%, what we're really going to end up paying, our APY, is 5.92% interest. Let's look at this one. It's the last one, I think. This one says, suppose your salary in 2012 is $70,000. If the annual inflation rate is 5%, what salary do you need to make in 2019 in order for it to keep up with inflation? Okay, so again, this is just a future value problem. So it's one of these. Got 1 plus R over N to the NT power. But the kind of thing that can be kind of tricky on this is it says this is the annual inflation rate. So then N is going to be 1. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward. We just plug into the formula. So we're starting with our salary of $70,000. We got 1 plus our inflation rate of 0.05. That's over 1. And then raised to the 1 times, and then let's see, we're trying to figure out what salary we need in 2019. So 2019 minus 2012 will be 7 years. So what I'm typing in my calculator is 70,000 times parenthesis 1 plus 0.05, and since that's over 1, you don't have to put it. And then I'm going to close parenthesis and raise my set of parentheses to the 7th power. So then get $98,497, and it rounds to 3 cents. So figuring out, where to put parentheses and stuff in your calculator is probably the trickiest part in this section. Okay? Let me know if you have any questions.